Here, there we go. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Jim McIntyre. I'm the chair for today's planning and development meeting. We have some nice friendly faces in the crowd. Thank you for coming. We'll call the meeting to order. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move along to public meetings. Okay, welcome and good morning. Today, there are 3 public meetings scheduled in accordance with the Planning Act. I'm pleased to advise that this is being broadcast live on the Township's YouTube channel, where a recording of this meeting will be available. Notice of public meeting concerning the 2 zoning bylaw amendment applications was sent by first-class mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property. Signage was also posted on the subject property to provide information about the applications. All of this was in accordance with the Planning Act process for a statutory public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment application. Notice of today's public meeting concerning the new official plan was advertised in 2 local online news boards posted on the Township's website and social media channels, as well as being provided to all those previously participated or indicated a desire to participate in the official plan review in accordance with the Planning Act process for a statutory public meeting. The purpose of the meetings is to inform and provide the public and the Planning and Development Committee with an opportunity to ask questions or express views with respect to the proposal. The format of the public meetings for the zoning bylaw amendments will be as follows. First, the applicant's agent will generally explain the purpose and effect of the application. Secondly, Township staff can provide further information and clarify any statements of the applicant and/or their agent. Next, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And lastly, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification on the proposal and provide comments. At the conclusion of the public meeting, the applicant, their agent, and if required, Township staff will be given the opportunity to respond to the questions and comments received. The format of the public meeting for the new official plan will be as follows. The Township's consulting planners, MHBC Barry, will provide their presentation. Next, the public will be permitted to ask the questions and express views on the new official plan, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And lastly, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification and provide comments. No decision will be made today at the public meetings. Following the public meetings, the information obtained, including questions and comments submitted by members of the public and the committee, will assist the applicant, Township, and other consulting team and the County of Simcoe to determine the next steps. Township is approval authority for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and the County of Simcoe is the approval authority for the new official plan, for which this committee may recommend the bylaws be considered by Township Council or ask for additional information prior to Council's consideration. If in the future Township Council decides in favor of the application by adopting recommendations from this committee, specified persons who have provided oral or written submissions but disagree with the decision may be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, under the Planning Act. If in the future Township Council decides in favor of adopting a new official plan, the County of Simcoe will then make a final decision as the approval authority. Specified persons who have provided oral or written submissions but disagree with the decision may be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, under the Planning Act. Individuals attending the public meeting in person or by YouTube, Zoom, or telephone may email or call the Township's Planning Department to submit contact information to receive notice of the decision. Public meeting regarding 12778 County Road 16 zoning bylaw amendment application. I now call on the applicant's agent, Lauren Arsenault from Morgan Planning and Development, to please present the information provided within the item C.1.3.1 of the agenda package and explain the purpose and effect of the application. Over to you, Lauren. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair McIntyre, and good morning to committee members and members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to present on this application. My name is Lauren Arsenault. I'm a planner with Morgan Planning and Development. I'm also joined by my colleague, Senior Planner Victoria Lemieux, and we are available to answer any questions after the presentation. So I have a PowerPoint prepared, and I'll just pull up my screen here if you give me a second. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So we were retained by Ethan Grober, potential purchaser of the subject property 12778 County Road 16, to facilitate a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for a self-storage facility as an additional permitted use on the property. The subject property is located within the settlement area of Fesserton in the Township of Severn, located on the east side of Highway 400 between the Vasey Road and County Road 16 exits. The property has an approximate lot frontage of 51 meters and approximate lot area of 1.4 acres. Municipal services are not available to the subject property, and there's no existing well or septic on site. The property is currently being used for outdoor storage of boats, trailers, and construction equipment. There are two buildings on the property, one being a small stone building, the other being a small barn, which is in disrepair and proposed to be removed. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the subject property from the current general commercial zone to a site-specific general commercial exception zone, to add the self-storage facility as an additional permitted use. The existing lot frontage is less than is required under the zoning standards for the C1 zone, so that's a legal non-complying lot. However, the proposed development is appropriately scaled to accommodate for this. So here's a look at the concept plan, which features a 7,600 square foot storage building with two-way drive aisle that encircles the building. Parking has also been provided. The barn would be removed. However, the stone building would be retained, as you can see here, and this is proposed to be used for security purposes. The proposed development is located away from all of the existing drainage ditches on the property, as you can see. And portable toilets are also proposed, as this property is not serviced and is not proposed to be serviced by well or septic. The proposed development will, of course, be subject to site plan control, and through this process, site design will need to meet urban design policy and guidelines. Further appropriate buffering, fencing, draining, etc. will all be addressed through that site plan control process. Here's a look at the draft zoning schedule. The entirety of the property is proposed to be rezoned to the general commercial site-specific exception to allow for the self-storage use. The entirety of the subject lands are designated as settlement within the county's official plan. Settlements are the focus for population and employment growth and development within the county and are subject to population and employment forecasting and targets. It's important to note that the settlement area of Fesserton is a rural unserviced settlement area and therefore is not subject to employment density or intensification targets within the county's official plan. The zoning bylaw amendment will maintain a commercial use, which is in line with this designation and contributes modestly to the employment forecast for the township as directed by the province. The property is designated as a settlement employment area in both the township's official plan and township's draft official plan. The settlement employment area designation seeks to encourage commercial development that will provide a full range of goods and services. A wide array of commercial and industrial uses are permitted in this designation, including warehousing, wholesaling, and distribution facilities, which are similar uses in that they require the storage of goods and may have a similar built form. It's the opinion of Morgan Planning and Development that the proposed additional permitted use of a self-storage facility is compatible with the settlement employment designation. Morgan Planning and Development feel the application conforms and complies with all levels of applicable planning policy and represents good land use planning for the following reasons. The rezoning will allow for the efficient commercial development of underutilized employment lands, and the proposed development is compatible with surrounding land uses and conforms to the rural character of the settlement area. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and Victoria and myself are available to answer any questions you may have regarding the application.
Any questions? Move along to staff's presentation. Does the Township's planner, Brad Oster, have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant? Mr. Oster, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to committee and members of the public in attendance. As Ms. Arsenault has explained, this application does seek to add an additional permitted use on the subject lands, being a self-storage facility. Morgan Planning has provided a planning justification report with their application, which evaluates it against all of the applicable planning policy documents. And they have opined that the application conforms to or does not conflict with any of those policy documents. Township staff do generally concur with that opinion as expressed by Morgan Planning. I would point out to the committee that development of the site will be subject to site plan control, where we can look at those more technical matters and ensuring appropriate parking and loading spaces, stormwater management, and snow storage. Township staff are supportive of the application, subject to any comments received at today's public meeting, and are available if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oster. Now, any persons present in person, on Zoom, or on the telephone who have any either questions or comments on the application will now be invited to speak. Township staff will call upon each registered participant. For those in remote attendance, unmute yourself when called upon and turn on your camera if you wish. All will be required to give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that your comments will also be recorded and live streamed to the Township's YouTube channel and will remain online. The Township does not have the ability to edit the live stream, to remove any personal information provided in the course of submitting comments or questions. Mr. Oster, are there any members of the public registered to speak?
Thank you, Chair. There are no members of the public registered to speak for this application.
Thank you, Mr. Oster. Anyone in the chambers have anything to say? Are there any members of the public who did not get called and would like to speak? Please unmute yourself. Or for those in person, please approach the microphone and give your name, address for the minutes. Seeing none, could the Township's planner please summarize any additional correspondence that has been submitted on this application, provide any further information?
Chair, there has been no additional correspondence received for this application besides what was attached to the agenda.
Ms. Arsenault, anything further?
Nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anything from the committee? Do the members of the committee have any questions? Member Minnings.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Oster, or to the planner, actually. I'm asking about the new building structure. Is there going to be an office as part of that, or is it solely storage unit spaces?
Mr. Oster.
Thank you, Chair. I would maybe defer to the applicant's agent for an answer to that.
Through the chair, it's my understanding that the main building would be just used for storage, and the office would be located in that existing structure, the existing stone building.
Okay, thank you. So a subsequent question then is around the use of porta potties, as it is a commercial use for this land. And there are other potentially future buildings going up in this area. So I'm questioning why there isn't a well or a septic being put in here. And I would hate to see it set a precedent for other commercial uses along that strip where we see new businesses operating with porta potties.
And who would like to answer that? Do you have anything, Mr. Oster?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Ontario Building Code, it sets out the standards of what is required to be provided and what the municipality can ask for in terms of servicing. Given the type of use that is proposed, the Township's chief building official will review this at the time of site plan to ensure that an appropriate servicing solution that is permitted under the Ontario Building Code will be provided on site. The municipality does have other examples in the township where a self-storage facility exists, and the type of servicing is porta potties, just given the very limited use of those facilities on site, given the use.
Member Minnings, anything further?
Thank you, through the chair. Just a note that a consideration of proper septic should be there. I imagine there's going to be staff. My experience with storage units is that people can spend quite a bit of time there, and I appreciate storage or porta potties are a good alternate, but for long use planning and use of this particular space, and to my earlier point, future commercial buildings that are being erected in areas, I'd like the township to see what they can do to influence proper septic, et cetera, at the time that new buildings are coming forward. Thank you.
Okay, committee, anything further? Member Cox.
I don't have a problem with this application. I think it fits in with the area on County Road 16. And I think it's a perfect solution for this piece of property. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything further? Seeing no further discussion, do we have a draft motion, Madam Clerk?
Yes, thank you. So the motion reads that planning report number P24-022 dated June 19th, 2024, with respect to zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z2403 for the subject lands located at 12778 County Road 16 be received. And further, that a draft zoning bylaw amendment be presented to council for consideration at the next available meeting, subject to comments received prior to council's consideration of the zoning bylaw amendment, including additional submissions from council, the Planning and Development Committee, members of the public, circulated agencies, and township departments.
Sorry about that. Again, public meeting for 1171 Jermey Road zoning bylaw amendment application. I now call on the applicant's agent, Lauren Arsenault from Morgan Planning and Development, to please present the information provided within item C.2.3.1 of the agenda package and explain the purpose and effect of the application. Lauren, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee, for your comments on the previous application. Thanks for the opportunity to address this application. Morgan Planning and Development were retained by the owners of 1171 Jermey Road to facilitate a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for a second dwelling on this property. I'm just going to share my screen here, if you give me a second. So the subject property is located between Burnside Line and Carleon Line at the end of Burnside on the south side of Jermey Road. There is a small residential cluster of properties in the area. The property has approximately 100 meters of frontage along Jermey Road and approximately 1 hectare of lot area. The property is currently developed with a dwelling, detached garage, and shed. There's also an above-ground pool with surrounding deck area and a pond on the property. The existing dwelling is serviced by private well and septic. Here is a look at the existing dwelling on the property. The existing dwelling is a 2,000 square foot, 1.5 story bungalow with a loft and a basement that is unfinished. The existing dwelling has a footprint of 123 meters squared. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the subject property to a site-specific rural residential zone to allow for the construction of a second residential dwelling and attached garage. The township's draft official plan does allow for additional residential units in detached accessory structures on rural properties. However, the zoning bylaw has not been updated to reflect this policy. During pre-consultation with township staff, it was determined that a site-specific exception to allow for a second dwelling was appropriate for the property, rather than seeking relief from the accessory apartment and accessory structure provisions. So here's a look at the concept plan. The property owners are proposing to build a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom bungalow with covered entry and attached 2-car garage in the northwest portion of the lot. The existing entrance off of Jermey Road will be maintained, and a separate driveway off the existing driveway will lead to the new dwelling. The new dwelling will be serviced by a separate well and septic system. The second dwelling will be marginally larger than the existing dwelling, which we feel is appropriate given the new larger dwelling will be located closer to the road, and the built form of the property will still reflect that rural character of the area. Essentially, this proposed development will look very similar to a situation where an accessory dwelling would be permitted as in an accessory structure, which is a built form and use that the township's official plan allows for, especially when you consider that the existing dwelling is modestly sized and could be considered accessory to that new dwelling. Here's a look at the zoning matrix, which shows how the second dwelling meets the requirements for a dwelling in the rural residential zone. The only exception is the number of permitted dwellings. The proposed RR exception zone would establish the following performance standards. Notwithstanding zoning bylaw section 6, table 6.2, the maximum number of dwellings permitted B2 and the maximum permitted dwelling units B3. And so this will allow an opportunity for an additional dwelling unit to be contained within one of these dwellings, which is in line with direction from the province. Here are elevation drawings on the proposed second dwelling. This design is typical of rural residential development, a bungalow recessed behind an attached 2-car garage with a peaked covered entrance. The design is aesthetically pleasing and features natural materials, including ashlar stone along the front facade. The subject property is zoned rural residential in the township's zoning bylaw and designated rural in the township's official plan. A detailed review of applicable planning policy has been provided in our planning justification report. It's the opinion of Morgan Planning and Development that the application conforms and complies with all levels of applicable planning legislation and represents good land use planning for the following reasons. The rezoning will permit a second dwelling on the property, which is intended to house the property owner's daughter and son-in-law and their family. The proposed development is compatible with surrounding uses and the rural character of the area, and the existing development on the property could be considered accessory to the proposed development and therefore meet the intent of policy within the township's official plan. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have regarding the application.
Any questions? Mr. Oster, would you comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. As Ms. Arsenault has presented, this application does seek to permit a second detached dwelling on the property, along with a maximum of 3 dwelling units on the lands. The current zoning bylaw would allow for 1 single detached dwelling together with an accessory apartment within that dwelling for a maximum of 2 dwelling units, whereas this application would permit, as mentioned, the 2 single detached dwellings with a maximum of 3 dwelling units. So they could have the 2 dwellings and then an accessory apartment within one of those dwellings. As Morgan Planning explained within their planning justification report, they have evaluated this application against all of the applicable policy documents, and they are of the opinion that it conforms to or does not conflict with any of the applicable policies. The legislation and policy documents enacted by the province of Ontario does direct municipalities to provide various forms of housing where and as appropriate. The township's current official plan does permit single detached dwellings and accessory apartments within the rural designation, which these lands are designated, provided that there are no negative impacts to any natural heritage features and provided that the uses can be appropriately serviced on site. There are no mapped natural heritage features on or adjacent to the property, and a licensed septic installer has provided the municipality with confirmation that a new septic system can be accommodated on site. Township staff generally concur with the professional planning opinion of Morgan Planning as presented in their planning justification report, and staff are supportive of this application, subject to any comments received at today's meeting, and we're available if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oster. Any persons present in person, on Zoom, or telephone who have either questions or comments on the application will now be invited to speak. Township staff will call upon each registrant participant. For those in remote attendance, unmute yourself when called upon and turn on your camera if you wish. All will be required to give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that your comments will also be recorded and live streamed to the Township's YouTube channel and will remain online. The Township does not have the ability to edit the live stream to remove any personal information provided in the course of submitting comments or questions. Brad, are there any members of the public registered to speak?
Thank you, Chair. No, there is no one registered to speak for this application.
Is there anyone present in the audience or any members of the committee who have anything they'd like to say? Seeing none. Oh, sorry. Member Minnings.
Thank you through the chair. There was a lot of reading for today's meetings. Anyway, Mr. Oster, I am supportive of this proposal, but my question is related to so many other things on today's agendas that reference the official plan, and this one does too. There's lots of references in the presentation we just saw to the official plan. So from that, a detached accessory structure, I've got the definition here, and it's what I thought it was. So I really want your professional advice on what we're being asked to approve, because I understand from the presentation it's a second residential unit, like a house, a 3-bedroom house. But when I also see accessory structure on the same parcel of property as a principal structure, it talks about incidental use such as garages, sheds, gazebos, and that's kind of where I was going. So could you talk to that? Because it's important for me to understand that, especially in light of the official plan conversation that's also on the agenda. Thank you.
Mr. Oster.
Through the chair to Member Minnings, this application proposes essentially a second principal dwelling. So the new dwelling that is proposed through this isn't considered to be accessory to the existing dwelling. The township's current official plan, which is in place and in effect that the application must be evaluated against, permits single detached dwellings on the property. So the rural designation that is applied permits would permit single detached dwellings on there. The accessory piece could come in as part of an accessory apartment that's not being proposed today. But the rezoning that is before committee for consideration would allow the applicants to essentially install an accessory apartment within one of the two single detached dwellings that would be permitted.
So a subsequent question then perhaps for the planner, because she stated that the existing house could now be considered accessory to the new structure. And that's why I immediately looked up accessory structure. So is that correct? Because based on what you said, they are two actual residences. And I'm talking about the word accessory structure.
Through the chair to committee member, just to clarify, after discussions with staff, we felt it would be cleaner to set up the zoning amendment whereby a second dwelling is being requested as an additional use, rather than requesting relief from the accessory structure provisions in the zoning bylaw, which are not really intended to capture such a use. The proposed second dwelling meets the required provisions for a dwelling, including setbacks, height requirements, which are obviously in line with that use. Whereas the accessory structure provisions would regulate things such as sheds or detached garages. So it's really just sort of the justification for why we decided to take this route, even though the built form is going to look very similar to a situation where you would have an accessory dwelling unit and an accessory structure on the property.
Member Minnings? Anyone else? Nothing further? Nothing further, Ms. Arsenault? No? Okay. Does the applicant say, no, I guess you don't want to do that. Do the members have anything further? No? Do we have a draft motion, Madam Clerk?
Did you speak to the additional correspondence? Okay, I believe, Mr. Chair, we skipped a section. We did receive additional correspondence on this item if the planner can speak to it.
Oh, sorry about that. Mr. Oster.
Thank you, Chair. There was one piece of additional correspondence received from the County of Simcoe on this application, just stating that they had no objection provided that conformity with the Greenlands designation and the PPS natural heritage policies were addressed. Planning staff have reviewed the planning justification report submitted by Morgan Planning and are comfortable with the analysis included there. Thank you.
Draft motion, please.
Thank you. Motion reads that planning report number P24-023 dated June 19th, 2024, with respect to zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z2404 for the subject lands located at 1171 Jermey Road be received. And further, that a draft zoning bylaw amendment application be presented to council for consideration at the next available meeting, subject to comments received prior to council's consideration of the zoning bylaw amendment, including additional submissions from council, the planning and development committee, members of the public, circulated agencies, and township departments.
We have a mover, please. Moved by Member Minnings, seconded by Member Cox. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Committee.
Thank you, Madam Arsenault. I'll get that one day. We'll move along to the public meeting for a new township official plan. MHBC planning consultant Jamie Robinson and Kathy Suggitt from MHBC Barrie to please present the information provided within item C.3.3 of the agenda package. Welcome back, Jamie. Nice to meet Kathy. We finally get to meet Kathy. And please come forward and proceed, Jamie. You can sit right there. Or take the mic over.
Talking in public.
we go. All right. Thank you, Your Worship, Mr. Chairman, and members of council and members of the public. My name's Jermey Robinson. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning in Barrie. As mentioned, Kathy Suggitt's with me today, as well as our summer student, Miss Ashley Veldboom, is in the back as well, who's taking notes. So what we intend to do today, this is a statutory public meeting under the Planning Act related to the official plan for the township. The purpose of the meeting is what I'm going to do is provide a bit of an overview of the official plan. The presentation's fairly lengthy. A lot of it's there so that if folks want to review online afterwards, it's there. I'm going to hit on the highlights as I go through. And then it's really an opportunity for the public to provide any comments on the official plan. You certainly are welcome to provide comments today and also provide comments in writing after. We do encourage folks to provide written comments so we accurately reflect those comments. So next slide, please. So this is the agenda. As I mentioned, I'll provide an overview. I'll provide some details about the text and the mapping changes that have occurred since the last public meeting. Again, this is the second public meeting that's been held. And then there'll be an opportunity for comments to be made by members of the public. Next slide, please. So firstly, the purpose of the official plan, there's two real land use planning documents in that the municipality uses. The first is the official plan, which sets out policies. That's what we're dealing with today. The second planning document is the zoning bylaw. That's the one that sets out the rules on where you can place buildings and structures on a property and density of development and the types of uses that specifically exist. The official plan really sets the stage for the consideration of amendments and development. And I look at it as it's a snapshot of what you want your community to look like in 20 years. There's a 20-year time horizon associated with an official plan. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this is the second public meeting. This council originally adopted an official plan back in November of 2022. And what happens after adoption is the plan gets shipped off to the county. The county is the approval authority for this official plan. So this council, the township council, would adopt the document. Since November of 2022, there's been a number of changes if people have been following to provincial legislation that have taken effect. And so what we've done is we have taken an opportunity to modify this document based on the changes to provincial legislation that have occurred, and those are included. We've taken an opportunity to review the document with county staff and have provided a number of changes as a result of that review, and just provided what we believe is some clarification to the document through both some mapping changes and some textual changes. Partway through this process, Kathy Suggitt came on the team. She was the one responsible at the county of Simcoe for the preparation of their official plan. She managed that project. So she brought a lot of insight to the table with respect to that as well, and has really helped out in massaging this document. So next slide, please. So I've talked about this a little bit more, but we've had, again, extensive discussions both with township staff and with county staff on this document, trying to refine it. Next slide, please. So what's in this new official plan? The structure is generally the same as the previous document that came before the last council for adoption. There's 9 maps that are included. We've included an additional map specifically related to natural heritage features, where we've broken down and provided the details about those features. The data and where that information comes from, the majority of it comes from the MNR and the mapping layers that they provide related to specific heritage features. And I'll show you that map as we work through. We've included, again, text changes and we've updated various parts of the official plan, which I'll provide a bit of a summary of in a moment. Next slide. Just in terms of the mapping schedules, this is just a list of them. I'm not going to go through them all, but Schedule D is a new schedule. The other schedules are effectively similar schedules as before. Next slide. What I'm going to do now is just walk through the different schedules and provide a bit of an overview of what's contained in each one of these schedules. And the schedules are effectively the maps that implement the policies. We've got the Schedule A that's really, it's called land use structure. So Schedule B's are designations and the very specifics, but Schedule A sets out a natural heritage system. The previous version of the plan called it Greenlands. So we had a Greenlands natural heritage, we had a Greenlands structure map, which is here, but then we also had a Greenlands designation. So just to provide and to ensure there wasn't some confusion, we've renamed this, what was Greenlands on here, as natural heritage system. That aligns with what the terminology that's used by the province and aligns with the terminology that's used by the county. You will see the Greenlands designation on the next slide. The countryside area, that really incorporates rural lands and agricultural lands. And then you've got settlement areas. And then finally, the south of Division Road secondary plan, which is a long-standing area that borders the city of Aurelia south of Division Road that's existed for a number of years. But those are the key main aspects that exist with respect to the community structure. So you've got your settlement areas, you've got your countryside areas, and you've got that natural heritage system that's interspersed within it. Next slide, please. You can go to the next slide. So Schedule B to the official plan, there's a north and a south version. So this is the land use schedule. This sets out the designations that fall in line. And if you look at the table of contents in the official plan, you'll see that all of the designations that are listed in the table of contents, there's specific policies that pertain to those designations. So you'll see an objective, you'll see permitted uses, and then you'll see policies that flow from that. So when you look at the table of contents, so specifically, if your property is located in the green area, or if it's located in the red area, or if it's located in the beige area, you'd go to the table of contents. If it's rural, for example, you'd go to the rural designation in the table of contents, and it outlines for you what the permitted uses are on that property and what the specific policies are that apply. What the key changes are that have been made to Schedule B, we've made some refinements to the shoreline designation, and we've got some details on that, but just to reflect the existing lot fabric, the previous version just carried forward what was in the previous plan, but we've taken a more refined look at it, at that specific designation. We've also specifically designated the marina properties within the municipality as well in an employment designation. Next slide, please. You can go to the next one as well. So again, Schedule A, B, and C, they really deal with the land uses. So Schedule C is the southern portion of the municipality, and that's again the land use schedule, same as Schedule B, but for the southern portion of the township. Next slide. You can go to the next slide as well. Schedule D, so this is a new slide. Effectively, what this does is break out, I guess what I should have mentioned on the last one as well, one of the other key changes was that we took what was the Greenlands designation and we separated it out into two designations. One being the environmental protection and the second being the Greenlands designation. What the environmental protection designation applies to are provincially significant wetlands. So those, which generally, if there is a hierarchy in the province of features that need to be protected, those are the most important feature for being protected. So there was that modification that was made. That was an additional modification on Schedule B and Schedule C. On Schedule D, what this schedule does is within that Greenlands designation or natural heritage system, which is on Schedule A, it breaks it down into the specific features that comprise or make up those schedules. So you see things like provincially significant wetlands. It actually identifies where those are. It identifies other wetlands. It identifies and symbolizes smaller wetlands. It identifies areas of natural and scientific interest. Those are ANSIs. and it identifies deer wintering areas. So those specific components of the natural heritage system are now referenced graphically on this schedule. And then if you were to look at the official plan, you'll see policies that apply to each one of these features that exist. So there's policies if development is proposed either in or adjacent to, which is within 120 meters of deer wintering area, for example. There's specific policies that need to be met prior to development proceeding to ensure that feature is protected. So that's how the mapping really relates and joins in with the policies that exist. I guess let's go to the next slide, please. Schedule E is the transportation schedule. So what this schedule establishes are key roadways, trail networks within the municipality, identifies roads. It also, from the aggregate perspective, we know aggregates are very prevalent in the municipality. It outlines which roads are identified specifically as haul routes, which can be used for the transportation of aggregate resources. Within the official plan, there are specific policies that deal with each one of these roadways. So, for example, arterial roads and collector roads, the official plan specifies right-of-way widths. So what council might see or committee of adjustment might see is where there's planning applications proposed. If a road does not meet the right-of-way width, which is identified in the official plan, you could see a condition of approval of an application being a road widening, that someone would have to dedicate land to the municipality to achieve those minimum right-of-way widths that are identified on the transportation schedule. That's how this really gets used in a day-to-day perspective at the township. Next slide, please. Overlay designation, Schedule F deals with overlays. So there's a number of different overlays here. Waste disposal sites and final waste disposal sites. There's 500-meter area of influence established around those waste disposal sites. There's also the TransCanada Pipeline that runs through the municipality. So there's specific policies that deal with development in proximity to those areas. This map in sort of beige color identifies aggregate resource potential areas. This isn't a specific designation, but what the province requires us to do is identify areas where there is the potential for aggregate resources or extraction. So those are sand and gravel and quarry potential areas for quarries as well. So rock deposits and sand and gravel deposits. Also identified on this map is flooding areas that are subject to flooding hazards. Next slide, please, Allison. Next slide. Schedule G deals with source protection. There's nothing new here. This is a carryover that was a specific amendment to the current official plan. And this all resulted as a result of the Walkerton inquiry and the Clean Water Act that was enacted by the province. This is a schedule that identifies specific areas of influence, we'll call them, around drinking water supplies, and that's municipal drinking water supplies, not individual wells that service an individual property, but municipal drinking water supplies. It identifies recharge areas, and there's specific policies that go along with protecting these important drinking water supplies. Next slide, please. You can go to, and SA1, this is where these schedules are blow-ups effectively, or inserts that deal with the settlement areas. So within that, it identifies some specific designations that apply to settlement areas. So residential designations, employment uses, and those sorts of things. So these are the 4 settlement areas that exist within the municipality. Next slide. Or sorry, the 4 that are in the north, and then we've got the additional 4 settlement areas here for the township. Next slide. I mentioned previously the table of contents. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the first step in identifying your property and what applies to it is to review the mapping, and specifically Schedule B and C, as well as those settlement area schedules we were just on. And then look at the policies and follow them through to the table of contents, and it'll direct you where to go. Next slide. And you can go to the next one, please. So just in terms of key changes and key modifications, this is what I think council would be most interested in, are these next few slides. And I've already alluded to some of these items, but specifically the focus of growth within this document, we've just reiterated that the growth is directed to the settlement areas, and specifically focus is on those settlement areas that are fully serviced, the Coldwater and the West Shore settlement area. And then subsequent to that, the remaining settlement areas are, growth is also focused to those areas, but not to the same extent of Coldwater and West Shore. And in terms of rural areas and rural recreation, those are sort of tertiary areas. Rural areas are locations where rural land uses such as agriculture, aggregate extraction, and the use of resources is the focus. New law creation is not the focus outside of settlement areas. Next slide, please. I already mentioned from a designation perspective, we've established again an environmental protection designation now and a Greenlands designation, which separates those provincially significant wetlands that were identified on schedule. I think it was Schedule D. We've also identified changes to the shoreline designation. We've added some, really just refined it. We've gone lot by lot and specifically made modifications to that. And roughly the shoreline designation applies to lands that are within 100 meters from the high water mark on Lake Couchiching and the Severn River and T Lake and other inland water bodies. We've identified all marinas and resorts within a resort employment designation and provided specific policies around those. That's a new change to the plan. We've updated the agricultural and rural designations to reflect the recent changes to provincial policy. And we've just renamed the public service facilities designation to community uses. The reason for that is because we refer to public service facilities throughout the document in a different context, and we wanted to avoid confusion in terms of terminology there. So that's the designation that things like arenas and sports fields and the fairgrounds and that are located within. Next slide, please. Just in terms of general, we've one change that we've made is in a number of the designations, you would see different policies repeated. Where that occurred, we basically moved those into a general provision. So they're listed once in the plan instead of in the agricultural designation and the rural designation and the Greenlands designation. We've included it just in a general set of policies to provide for some ease of use and simplification of the document. And we've updated sections related to waste management to be consistent with the county's document. Next slide, please. In terms of implementation, again, we've just provided some modifications to be consistent with the provincial plans and the changes that have occurred there. And as far as the subdivision and secondary plan, we provided some updates to that, the policies in the previous version of the plan. But what we ended up finding out in processing applications and considering how we basically ran some test cases and in processing current applications and evaluating how it fit in with the adopted OP in the previous one. And what we found was it was best just to carry forward the existing policies that are in the current OP related to the South of Division Road secondary plan, as opposed to trying to refine those. It's a long-standing document that's been in effect for a long time. And we felt it was best to, through discussions with staff and county, to make the modification there and kind of go back to what was in the current plan for that area, because those policies are so specific. Next slide, please. And we're almost done here. I think I've already talked about the mapping changes enough, so we can flip to the next slide. So just in terms of next steps, Where we go from here, and I thank everybody for indulging. I know it's been a bit of a long presentation, but it's important nonetheless. This document's going to be available online for anyone that would like to review it. The draft or the official plan is also online for review for anyone who would like to review. The intent is that staff's going to bring a recommendation report back to council. The meeting we're targeting for that is, I think, is it the 25th that we're targeting? 26th for that. And then the intention is that council would consider that new official plan or this version of the OP for adoption at that meeting. If that occurs, then it would be forwarded off to the county, who is the approval authority. As mentioned, we've had a lot of discussions with the county in preparation of this version. So our hope is that it'll be a fairly quick turnaround in terms of their review and then providing a recommendation to actually approve this document. So that's the intent. The reason we needed to have this other meeting is there's been a lot of time lapse and there's been sufficient changes to the document that we believe, including the change to designation on some folks' property, that warranted this other public meeting. I would recommend to the public that if anyone wants to be notified of the decision that comes out of the county, that they are to contact the clerk at the county and specifically ask to be provided with the notice of decision. Residents do still have appeal rights related to official plans. And again, those appeals are to the county, not to the township, because the county is the approval authority. Just in terms of a couple closing remarks here, this plan, I know there was a meeting last night that had a number of comments made at it and a number of feedback related to a specific application. The intent of this meeting today is to deal with the policies that are very specific to the official plan. In terms of the issue last night, as I understand it, it related to what has historically been referred to as group homes. In terms of this official plan and how it deals with group homes are identified and they are a permitted use. They're a form of housing. They're a permitted use in residential designations within settlement areas. They're a permitted use within rural designations as a form of housing. And where that really comes from is the Planning Act. The Planning Act specifically does not allow municipalities through their planning documents, that's the county and the township, and simply put, it doesn't allow people zoning. So it doesn't allow zoning based on the type of person living in a dwelling or a house. It considers and it requires that these sorts of facilities are to be permitted everywhere. Anywhere there's a dwelling unit permitted, that group homes, for example, are permitted also. In terms of regulating those facilities, so effectively they take that issue out of the land use planning framework. So it's not something that can be controlled through a Planning Act application or Planning Act document, which is the documents we're dealing with today. Those facilities have ministry requirements through the province that are dealt with through other pieces of provincial legislation that control their use, that control the specific management and structure of those facilities. So it's those other mechanisms and those other pieces of legislation in this province that specifically control those items. So I just wanted to make that closing point that this isn't a meeting to specifically deal with that point. If folks have concerns about if they have concerns about how this document deals with group homes, then certainly this is the forum. But as I mentioned, our hands we're really limited in how we can through a land use planning process apply rules and regulations and policies to deal with those types of that form of housing. It's really other mechanism. If folks have concerns, they can certainly request to make a deputation to council at a subsequent meeting. They can certainly provide comments to their local MPP, but this isn't really the specific form unless your comments are related to the OP and the policies contained within it. So I think that provides my presentation. I'll turn it back over to the chair. And certainly there's an opportunity for the public to provide comments and questions on this draft document. And the chair will walk us through that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for a very enlightening discussion about the OP. I am supposed to move along to the written correspondence. I guess that'll be Katie. I'd like to call upon the Township Senior Planner, Katie Mandeville, to summarize any written correspondence that has been received since the publishing of the agenda. Katie, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did receive some letters following the publishing of the agenda. I'm just going to give a brief overview of those letters since they will be within the minutes, and we'll be sending them to our consultants as well as part of the county package. So the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic School Board wrote in with some policy suggestions. Roger Miller wrote regarding 10394 Highway 11 South for site-specific policy recommendations. Morgan Planning wrote regarding Marina Village Drive for a site-specific designation. Morgan Planning also wrote regarding 8675 Highway 12 for a conversion of employment lands to residential. Morgan Planning also wrote regarding Riverdale Estates, which is an OMB approved subdivision that some members of council may be familiar with. Morgan Planning additionally, lastly, wrote about 3372 Agnew Road and a request for a site-specific designation there. Bell Canada wrote in simply requesting notice of the decision. And lastly, Celeste Phillips wrote in regarding a Southhorn Road property for a conversion of employment lands to residential, in addition to other policy requests for the site-specific property.
Thank you, Ms. Mandeville. Any persons present in person, on Zoom, or on the telephone who have either questions or comments on the application will now be invited to speak. Township staff will call upon each registered participant. For those in remote attendance, unmute yourself when called upon and turn on your camera if you wish. All will be required to give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that your comments will be recorded on live stream to the Township's YouTube channel and will remain online. The Township does not have the ability to edit the live stream to remove any personal information provided in the course of submitting comments or questions. Could the Township's planner, Brad Ulster, please call the first name?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just did a little bit of shuffling here, so I'm going to do that for Brad.
Okay.
I see Celeste Phillips is already on the screen, so perhaps she'd like to go first.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of committee. My name is Celeste Phillips, and I'm a land use planning consultant. I represent the numbered company that owns 25 acres of vacant lands at 2956 Southern Road in Coldwater, which is south of the Greenwood Landings Plana subdivision. The principals of the numbered company are Brian Smith and Ron Sheardown, who is in attendance with you today. These lands are currently designated for employment or industrial use, and I'm just going to share my screen if I can here. So I am here today virtually asking for 3 changes to your new official plan. I appeared before you in April of 2023 to introduce you to this property, and then attended a pre-consultation meeting with staff in February of this year. So this property, as you can see, is surrounded on 3 sides with what I've shown in yellow, which are residential uses. So this is the subject property, 2956 Southern. This is the existing subdivision that's under construction. There's a well-established subdivision to the south, and there are residential uses to the east. To the west is Novani Stainless Inc., which has now ceased operation, but this property is still designated for industrial use. So the property I'm speaking to you about today is 2956, and it's currently vacant. Parcel Economics concluded in their employment and fiscal benefit study that this property is unlikely to ever develop for industrial uses. It has very poor visibility. It has poor access for industrial purposes. And as I mentioned, it's surrounded on 3 sides with residential uses. And the types of uses that are currently permitted on this property would create land use compatibility issues with those residential uses. And from a planning perspective, the use of these lands for residential rather than industrial purposes is a logical extension of the Greenwood Landing subdivision to the north. And I have submitted correspondence to you, and you will note in there that I have indicated that one of the builders in the subdivision has a waiting list now of over 165 parties wanting to purchase a home in Coldwater. Our team, consisting of environmental and engineering consultants and archaeological and soils and noise, have prepared about 8 or 9 technical reports that have been completed and will be submitted to you. The first request I'm asking for council is that you direct staff and your consultants to change the land use designation for this property from industrial to the settlement living area, which is your residential category. This avoids the need for an official plan amendment, which would have to be approved by the County of Simcoe. And the designation of these lands now for residential purposes responds to the province's directions in several bills. Bill 23 was the More Homes Build Faster Act. Bill 109 is the More Homes for Everyone Act. And Bill 185 is the Cutting Red Tape Act. So it's a little bit hard to keep track of all of these initiatives and acts that the province is pushing forward, but definitely showing the desperate need for housing in the province of Ontario. Even if the lands were designated residential, which is our request to you, that would not preclude a public meeting. There would still need to be a public meeting related to the rezoning of the land. So the designation for residential doesn't stop public involvement. And what I'm showing on the screen now is the proposed plan of subdivision. It consists of about 80 residential units of different types and a stormwater management pond. We're proposing some single detached residential units, some live work units, some service industrial units, and also some freehold townhouses. The second request that I have outlined in the correspondence is I've asked for a revision to sections 4.1 and 4.2 of the new official plan. Those are the sections of your new official plan that indicate or make reference to pre-consultation meetings. Bill 185, which was approved less than 2 weeks ago, now removes the need to go through a pre-consultation meeting, which has in many situations been a very arduous process. Severn Township and several other municipalities had actually instituted a 2-step pre-consultation before applications could even be filed. So that lengthened the planning approval process. And so the province has now directed that pre-consultation meetings are no longer mandatory. Your official plan encourages them, and I'm asking that reference be made in the policy that these are not mandatory meetings. And the third request is to delete policy 6.5.6 of your new official plan. This is a policy that would require a change from an employment use to any other category to wait for a municipal comprehensive review by the county. And as many of you will know, the county did prepare a municipal comprehensive review document, sent it off to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. It's been there since August of 2022 and has not been approved. So what I would recommend to you is that the current and proposed provincial documents set the criteria for changing land uses from industrial to any other category. And I think that policy 6.5.6 needs either to be deleted or revised to reflect what the province has indicated regarding those types of conversions. I have attached 3 drawings to the submitted correspondence. The 2 of them I've shown to you today. Also, we have the draft plan of subdivision that is ready for submission as well. And this is the document that would be submitted with the planning applications. I actually have the planning applications for rezoning and subdivision ready to submit as well. I am happy to provide the employment and fiscal benefits study to you if you wish to see that. That document describes that if these lands were used for residential purposes, the municipality would see over $1.8 million in development charges that would be paid to the township. It would result in a 9-time increase in property taxes that would be realized from this property. This is an opportunity to use this property productively rather than to see it sit vacant. And it also would add residents to the village of Coldwater, which would assist in supporting Coldwater's downtown area. So on the basis that the province continues to encourage the provision of much needed housing, I'm respectfully requesting to you, members of council, that you favorably consider the 3 requests that I've made today. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Ms. Mandeville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Mr. Robinson might just want to speak to that request.
Go ahead, Mr. Robinson.
Through Mr. Chairman, so as part of the official plan review, I don't know if you'll just, those of you that were on the previous council will recall the very first presentation that was provided on the OP review included a slide that specifically dealt with site-specific applications, where it said that the intent of this are site-specific scenarios, and it indicated that through the OP review process that site-specific requests would not be considered through the OP process, and that individuals are encouraged, if they want to change the designation of their property, to prepare an application and submit that application to undertake that review. So from staff's perspective, that hasn't changed since the outset of the process. Specific applications, as I think Ms. Phillips had identified, they're in the process of preparing a number of supporting studies to justify their proposal. And those studies, in my opinion, are best dealt with and best addressed on a site-specific basis, as opposed to part of a comprehensive process, which is what this official plan review is. So I think that's kind of the main point I'd like to make. Certainly council's willing to do as they please. The only other piece I'd like to state is that as Ms. Phillips mentioned, there was, and just to bring it down a little bit, there was a growth management exercise that was undertaken by the county, and that growth management exercise, the township provided information that fed into that. It did provide specifics related to the need and the existing supply of employment lands within the municipality. And we recommend that if the municipality is going to be considering conversion of employment lands to a residential use again, that this process right here isn't the correct way to do it, that they should be making a specific application and dealing with it on its own merits. So, but certainly that's what the planning policies that state, and that's what they generally require. And it's our opinion that there should not be an exception made for this one instance. We've had a number of folks that have requested amendments to the plan through this process, and the messaging has been the same. It's that submit your application, and the application you dealt with like any other planning application this township deals with. So that's I think all I can provide on that.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
certainly
Robinson.
they've provided some good rationale which would support an application. So
Ms. Phillips, final comment?
Mr. Chair, I guess I would say in response is there's obviously a desperate need for housing in this province. In a perfect world, we might want to go through a conversion process that will take years for the county to approve an official plan amendment or have to wait for a municipal comprehensive review. I think the province has been clear that we need to be cutting red tape and getting houses to market. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for a property that's surrounded on three sides with residential to designate the lands residential now. We'll proceed with the subdivision and the rezoning application, but we just want to get that designation in place now rather than waiting years for it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mandeville, anyone else on the list? Oh, Ms. Woodruff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add one additional point and reminder that the county has identified we're currently in an employment lands deficit at this point in time. So that's just another reason that this proposal should be justified through a site-specific application, especially since we're in a deficit at this time. And the county, again, is the approval authority for this plan. So they will be reviewing this with a fine-tooth comb in terms of our employment land supply.
Thank you. Ms. Mandeville, anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have several people from Morgan Planning registered to speak. I don't believe they do want to speak in light of all the letters submitted, but I just wanted to perhaps give that opportunity. I know they are on the Zoom. Again, I don't believe they want to speak, but I'm just kind of talking here to see if anyone turns on their camera or unmutes themselves on the Zoom call, but it doesn't appear they are. So that would be everyone we had registered on Zoom.
Thank you. If there are any members of the public who did not get called and would like to speak, please unmute yourself now.
Mr. Chair, can I politely request a bio break quickly before we move to the audience?
Well, sure, we can have a. Why don't we reconvene here at Okay, folks, we're going to get back to the meeting. Call the meeting to order. I believe, Madam Clerk, we were at if there's any other members of the public, are we at that stage? Yes.
Yes, I believe we're welcome to get to the point where we entertain those that are in the audience if they want to bring forward comments.
Okay, well, why don't we do that? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to have a few words? Please come forward, identify yourself, and you want to sit at the table, Kevin, or do you want to go over to the dais? You got a book of notes? Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Welcome. Identify yourself and your address and phone. Thank you.
Good morning. Kevin Wood, 15 First Street, Aurelia. And to you, committee chair, your worship, council, staff, visitors. I'd like to address an issue in the OP on a particular property is 4338 Hamilton Street. That property has been building lots since 1877. Currently zoned C1. In the new OP, it's designated growth area 1. The abutting property is zoned settlement employment. So these properties have been together. Originally, there were 5 lots in 1877. At some point, they were merged. When we acquired them, they were put into 2 separate parcels, but they're abutting. So on this, I want to try and understand why one particular property, it's the westerly portion, if we can put up slide 19 and make it easier to understand. Is it possible to zoom in or? This will shade. No, that's fine. If I can just maybe point.
Big microphone.
Thank you. This is 4338 Hamilton Street. It's 1.5 acres total. It's both pieces are zoned C1. But this parcel here is GA1, and this is employment, community employment, I think it is. So there are 2 separate things identified in the OP that makes it very difficult to do anything with it. So, as it's already been mentioned that there's a deficit for employment lands. We've been working on this property for 3 years and had all kinds of studies done, still waiting on stuff to come back from different government agencies. And we'd like to do something with it, but now we've got a conflicting issue with this schedule in the OP that doesn't jive with the current zoning. I'm asking if that can be addressed, because if you look at the line as it comes up Hamilton Street, and then it turns, and then it cuts right through the middle of that property and takes half of it out of the equation. All the rest of it, which is all sand, whether we need an ambulance sign used to be, that's all in the settlement employment area. But for some reason, that corner of the property has been taken out, which makes it very difficult to do. And I don't think that we should have to make an application to change the OP, an OP amendment after, like when this is still in the draft stage. Like it was very difficult during COVID because we had to do everything online and it was very hard to find this stuff. But that's what the point of this meeting is, I believe, that we can come and address issues. That's all I want to say. Just asking the council will look at that. We'd like to do something. There's no other development land around Washago. And we've had inquiries of people that wanted to bring businesses into Washago, but we just said we're stuck. Thank you very much.
I'll just stand by, Kevin. We'll see if we can't get some kind of a response from perhaps Jermey.
Yes,
Jermey?
Mr. Chairman, what I can commit to is we'll take a look at the comments that have been provided and the mapping, both in this official plan, the current one, and the zoning bylaw. And in our comment summary table that comes back to council with our recommendation report, we'll provide a recommendation on whether we're making changes or not as a result of these comments.
Would there be a timeline on that, Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, when the report comes back to council for the 26th.
Next week?
Yeah.
Thank you. Kevin?
No, I got nothing more. Anyone have any questions?
Any questions for, yes, Member Minnings?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I do have the map very large on my screen, and it was smaller on the big screen, so I'm not familiar because the roads and the lots aren't marked on the screen where exactly your property is.
Hamilton Street comes up off.
No, I see that, but where is it? Near Muskoka Street, or is it further to the end?
Right across from the limestone. And it goes to the corner.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I knew where it was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions regarding this matter? No, Kevin, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience have anything they would like to address? Yes, please state your name and your address and so on.
Hi, I'm Phil Azaparty. First, I'd like to chair. Oh, it's off. Is it on? It's on. Okay. That's okay. What should I do? Speak up. Not my manner, but I will. Anyway, Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen, my concern is I have a site plan agreement for the development of a parking lot in Washago on lots 21, 22, 23, and lot C, which is partially filled. And it shows on the plan that it's environmental protection. Previously, we had lengthy discussions with council over a 3-year period in developing this land with their lawyers and with the Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Natural Resources, in the effort to do this right. And their understanding was, with letters from all of them, I'm sorry, I have a sore throat today. That's why it's tough for me to speak up, really. So their understanding was that there was no environmental protection issue with that section. It was more of a drainage issue with that section of the property within 9 meters of the creek that runs there. So the plan shows environmental protection running up onto our site, 3/4 of the way up. So I want to make sure that in the plan, it recognizes a C1 designation and that this environmental protection as shown on the plan, which is very, very big compared to what it was in the past. It was basically in the stream, does not impact that land. The other thing, unrelated to this parcel, which seems to be similar, is there was a site plan there's a developmental plan that was in place for another lot, which is at the corner of 169 and Hamilton Street. And Hamilton Street wraps right around it. And that site was for a mall. And the owner bored a hole underneath 169 highway to connect to the existing sewer and water so that he could have a three-way connection for future development in his site and other sites he was planning. So the environmental protection also wraps up onto that in this plan. And previously, it was moved away from there in all the planning that was done. So it would be important for, it's not my land, that what I'm speaking of, but it would be important for the lady who owns that, that environmental protection does not become an issue for her to go to council, to go to Simcoe County to discuss, because she's already, the issue has already been dealt with through meetings and great financial involvement in the past, and it has already been legislated. So my concern is that with a new site, a new plan agreement, our new plan, that these designations as they show may cause a lot more cost and a lot more issue on existing plans that should be ongoing and moving forward. So it would be important that we make those changes today or by the 27th, before the 27th, to allow those things to go forward. Is that something that's conceivable, or are we just going to say that what the plan shows is what it shows and we go from there and start again?
Mr. Robinson, any comment?
Just name and address first. So before we go any further, if I can for your name and address, sir, that would.
Oh, did I not say my name? I'm so used to knowing it, I didn't go ahead and make it public, I guess. I'm Phil Azzopardi. I'm at 3374 Muskoka Street. Sorry for that.
Mr.
Yeah, Mr. Robinson, please.
So, Mr. Chairman, same comment as with the previous individual. We'll take a look at it and identify in the comment table how it's been addressed one way or the other. So we'll certainly take a look at it. If you can provide us with your phone number as well, if we need to get in touch with you, that would be appreciated.
Okay.
I just one question. The three lots you were talking about, are they on Hamilton Street? The
parking lot?
The three that you initially discussed.
The lot 21, 22, 23, and lot C. They're off of the railroad right of way that comes off of Hamilton Street. So the site plan agreement had that as the entrance and allowed parking along there, plus the extended parking lot, the lots that were added for extended parking.
You want to leave your phone number now?
Oh,
okay.
I would do that if it's handy, but it could be nice to have a lot of people calling me. That'd be great. Okay.
You want to call the committee to speak at this moment? Or
I just
anybody else?
wanted to add something because there's
Sure.
a lot of history to Mr. Azzopardi's file, and I think staff is aware of it. Just to help Jamie and Kathy.
Okay.
Just
go ahead, Member Burkett.
Have the history, but I'm sure staff is aware that this was back in 1988, I think, was it not, Mr. Azzopardi? That
Yeah, actually started in 84, finished in 87.
Yeah, so there's a lot of history to this file, just for your benefit.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have anything to say? Please come forward. Okay.
Hi, Keith Prentice, 2400 Kinnear Side Road. I just want to remind council, thanks for the presentation today. I want to remind council that the backside of this document is the ratepayers, it's people. I'm a housing designer by trade, and I've noticed that the level of complexity in simply building anything or adding on to anything, we have a housing crisis. We're not talking about big developers here. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about individuals looking for houses for their kids or their parents. They can't afford in time or money the time it takes to do site plan controls and EIS studies and lot grading plans certified by engineers. They're shelling out hundreds of thousands of dollars simply to put additions on their homes. And so I just want that reflected in my comments, that we need to look at this OP from the standpoint of, how does this reflect for ratepayers and the people in the township? Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Anyone else?
My name is Fred Weening, 1016 Bonnybrook Drive. We heard a little comment a little earlier about the meeting last night, and I was somewhat dismayed, even though the particular subject matter wasn't really personally relevant to me, or I'm just trying to understand all the processes. But 100% of the feedback from the public was against the proposal set forward last night, yet the unelected members of the Committee of Adjustment ruled in favor. So what is the point of a public meeting when the public comment is of no effect in the meeting? At least I would have liked to have seen a postponement of the decision because there was such major feedback against the proposal. And who are these people? How did they get to make this major decision? It was a minor variance. Well, the minor was 22 meters compared to 1 kilometer. It's like less than 1%. This was a major, major variance we were talking about, not a minor variance. So this is really more just a comment that the people of this township are watching to see if their opinion matters in any way, shape, or form. And the chair of the meeting last night had a smirk on his face the whole night. It's like the green light was already underneath the desk. They just had to wait until they could pop it up through. That was the impression we all got. It was very, very disheartening. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Member Burkett.
Thank you. And through the chair, there was a public meeting yesterday only because, and I think, were you here to listen to what went on?
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, I wouldn't
our
be here.
our bylaw is a little outdated. Based on the bylaw that we do have today, it calls for a public meeting. And I think you heard Mr. Robinson state at the end the rationale as to why it's called a group, but it's not called a group home. What's it called now, Judith? What is it called now? They've changed the designation on it.
Yeah, we got that.
So the group homes today, and there was a case study, and I don't know what year it was in, some years ago in Ontario. I can't tell you what year it was, but someone challenged the group home in their area and they lost. So in today's world and in today's province, we can't discriminate about who lives. It's considered a house. So we can't discriminate against one person versus another. So yes, we did have a public meeting yesterday. It was part of the Planning Act. We had to have the public meeting because of our bylaw, the way it's written today. We will amend that bylaw. And I just want to reflect back. If we didn't have how am I going to word this? Just let me word it properly. If our bylaw was up to date, where we, like other municipalities have it, the house would have been built and the people would have been housed in that building without the public even realizing what went on. So it would have been up and done, and it would have been after the fact. To be transparent, we had to have the public meeting. Yes, it wasn't rubber stamp, but we can't vote against it because we would be in violation of the Planning Act. The province, we take direction from the province. It's difficult. It may be difficult, or maybe I'm not explaining it in a proper manner, but we here at the municipality take direction from the province. So the Planning Act states what we can and can't do. We can deviate from it, but they give us a guideline as to what we can and can't do. A group home is a right in our community and in any community in Ontario, in a settlement area.
Yeah, and so I understand that. My question then is, what is the point of a meeting? Because it was a foregone conclusion. You may as well just done it. I realize your bylaw is outdated, but it created a gong show that was totally unnecessary.
I'm sorry it came out that way.
I challenge each one of you to watch that.
I
Especially
did
the comments
I
from
did
the
watch
one
it last
thing
night
when he accused people in the public of being not, we'll say, not being in favor of the need. We all recognize the need, but he took a jab at some of the people in the public, and that's what really raised the ire. And then he refused to make a public apology. He labeled everybody in the room, I'm not going to say racist because that's not the proper term, but he labeled everybody as not being, we'll say, compassionate towards handicapped people. And that was not the case at all. He's the one that made that thing. And we all look for a public retraction, much like what we saw in Ottawa a few weeks ago, but he refused to make a public retraction, and people were just shocked that they had to defend their ability or defend their right to say, yeah, no, we recognize the need for this, but we didn't need the insult coming from the member.
The video was off last night. I think there was a power outage, so the generator was on.
No, there was no power. That was after the power outage.
But I couldn't see the video, so I couldn't see who was speaking and who wasn't speaking. All I heard were voices. So I will apologize. If you saw a member of the committee with a look on his face, I will take that and apologize for that. I wasn't there.
Okay.
To witness it. And I'm sure he didn't have that smirk, but if you're saying he did, I'm not going to dispute it.
Well, many people were cognizant of it.
But the reason the public meeting was there, as I stated, is our bylaws outdated.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So we just had to have the public meeting.
Okay, thank you.
As a procedure.
Member Burkett, can you explain to Mr. Winning that we have no authority over the
Committee of Adjustment is also its own entity. We have no authority over the Committee of Adjustment as council. Like I know members have said that you can bring it to council, but we can't overrule the Committee of Adjustment unless they've infracted something in the Planning Act that's gone beyond what the Planning Act states. Now, if they don't feel that the decision that they made last night was right, residents have the opportunity to take it to the OLT, I think. Do they not? No, they don't. Oh, so it's final. Whatever their decision is their decision.
Thank you, Mr. Weeding. Anyone else wish to make a comment on the official plan? I guess we'll turn to Ms. Mandeville. Okay. Anyone on council or on this committee wish to make it? Member Burkett.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Robinson. The secondary plan, it shows like on the map that it's just shaded with black lines. So has the heritage mapping been removed off the secondary plan?
Through Mr. Chairman, the secondary plan has its own, it had a more detailed environmental review when it was completed. So it has some detailed policies and detailed natural heritage feature mapping associated with it. If a development is proposed within that area, based on proximity and based on review at the time, there's certain they could have to do another environmental study for that area or for the specific area where development's proposed. So it is kind of set aside from everywhere else because it has its own unique policies.
Member Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Robinson. So from what I heard today and what I've heard out in the public, and from what Mr. I'm sorry, I only know your name as Kevin and Keith have spoken, is that the presentations we're hearing, the comments we're hearing from developers and from people are not consistent to what the county is trying to tell Severn Township. We need more residential development. It's been said, there are lands that have been locked. There are lands that people can't work on. And I believe that because the numbers aren't consistent, we need to let the county know that we need residential development. And I do know that they have told us we also need employment land development. But once again, to go back in the settlement areas, we don't have the capacity. Our infrastructure, we are doing an EA in Coldwater. We will definitely have to be doing one in West Shore. So I think, and I think that the problem's coming down to the fact is we have people who need homes and we would like to build them, but they're saying we need more employment. And it's like the chicken and the egg, which one comes first? But before we can do either, our infrastructure is lacking, and the cost to increase this infrastructure is a phenomenal amount that the government has said that they have money. So we need to let the county know that this may be, we need some money to help us with this. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
To you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I'm hearing, if I can circle back with it, is that the county has given us some growth management numbers and for both employment and residential. And those growth management numbers don't seem to align with the demand and the need, which is being expressed here today. Like we heard the number that there's a waiting list for 160 some people in Coldwater. Yet they're telling us we've already got enough land designated and we've got enough, and we've got a concern with employment. So I think the message then, what I'm hearing, I think what you're getting at is that would it be appropriate for council to include as part of our resolution or recommendation when this goes to the county that to request that they take another look at the whole supply and demand piece and land supply and availability in light of the comments that we've heard through this process, that there doesn't seem to be an alignment with what's on the ground and what's out there and the demand in comparison to what's been provided so far.
Thank you very much. That's exactly it. And because you have the knowledge and the verbiage, I would like that to happen with us. I also have a few other questions. When this OP goes through, we don't have garden suites anymore. Am I right? Through the chair to Mr. Robinson?
I can take
or to Ms. Mandeville.
I can start, and Katie can correct me if I misspeak. But additional so the province has changed the Planning Act to include requirements for additional dwelling units. What remains in the Planning Act is a section that deals with garden suites under the temporary use section in the Planning Act. So garden suites would fall within the additional housing umbrella policies within the official plan. But I think what you're going to start to see is less and less garden suite applications because they have a time limitation and temporary, because you are permitted additional dwelling units subject to meeting technical requirements. They have to have the right servicing. They have to have their well and septic and those sorts of things. So.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair to Ms. Mandeville. So will that mean that once the OP has passed from the county, that the people who have done garden suites in the past will get their deposits started to return to them, because they sit on quite a lot of money saying that they have to have this before, and they don't get the $15,000, $20,000 back. So I just wanted to know where that goes with this whole procedure. Thank you.
Through the chair to Member Cox, I think we've talked about this a few times in the past, so it's just a reminder. People who have garden suites legally in this township, they have an agreement registered on title to their property, and with that comes a timeline and some financial securities the township holds. So essentially, after our official plan is in place, we'll either be doing a new official plan. After the new official plan is in place, we'll have to do a new zoning bylaw. Or, we might do some quick housekeeping updates for a few things and then a new zoning bylaw down the road. We're not sure of the exact approach yet, but basically we'll need to change the zoning bylaw to allow multiple dwellings as of right on every property. Once that change in the general zoning bylaw is in place, then those folks who have these garden suites could come forward and ask to be released out of that agreement that's on title. So we'd have to remove that agreement from title, and then we'd be able to refund that deposit. But as Mr. Robinson mentioned, there is criteria for some of these additional units. So hopefully it will meet those criteria, and therefore they could all become permanent. For whatever reason, there may be people who don't want them to become permanent, and then they could still allow that to go through the current normal process and have that timeline associated with it.
Okay, thank you. Supplemental? The other one I want to ask, and I know the answer, but I would like to ask it because I know there are people who have asked me, and I think it's something that we should have on tape. With the way our township is and the severing of lots in agriculture or in the country to do infill lots, with the natural heritage color we have, it is a hard or impossible, next to impossible, for people to sever lots for family members or whoever they want to do. I have a concern with that, you well know. But will this official plan give us more say for that, and not as so that people can, as Mr. Prentice alluded to, with the costly, the money costs for people to do it, because it almost seems like it's an oxymoron, is we need you to build houses, but we can't afford to build houses. And I understand it comes from the province, but I worry, or not worry, I wonder if we have enough power to do this. And if the county doesn't have planning authority anymore, does that put it back more on us to be able to look at these individually and see if maybe it is an outcrop off a agricultural land that's a rock that you could build on, or all these other things? I know I talked to you about it, but I would like other people to hear, please. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
Through Mr. Chair. So one point is this version of the official plan does provide for a little bit more rural lot creation through the infilling process, which wasn't in the previous version. There's some changes proposed to the provincial policy statement that would allow for some additional rural development, although it's limited. And then just as to the point of study requirements and dealing with environmental protection lands, there is an ability through the application process for staff, if they've identified that there isn't a feature there, or the mapping might be incorrect, or based on the lay of the land specifically, they can, if it's appropriate, not require a study in certain instances. So there's a bit of that flexibility built into the document.
Thank you very much.
Member Brennan and then Member Burkett.
Thank you very much. Yes, a couple of things. First of all, thanks very much for that excellent presentation today. And this document, I can guarantee you I don't agree with everything in it, but it is one well-written document, and I have to say I'm impressed with the quality. I just want to make two comments, and I have three quick questions, if I may. I know that the strong endorsement of the aggregate industry, including the demand that no supply studies are needed, is required. I want to note that that is most regrettable in any kind of sustainable planning for the future, particularly in the absence of strong planning policies around biodiversity. For those of you here, the two biggest challenges of our times right now are basically emissions and the threats of biodiversity. And in fact, it's interesting, just June 13th, the National Strategy to Protect Nature was released by the feds. So unfortunately, Ontario hasn't signed on yet. Nova Scotia and British Columbia have. But there's strong movements elsewhere to do the right kind of planning. And you can't let one thing like aggregates run holus bolus and not have provisions for appropriate levels of solid protection of biodiversity. There's no sustainable future in the absence of that. So again, I know it's a requirement. It's not something that we have an option to fool with right now, but hopefully over time, we will be able to incorporate that into our planning. I also wanted to comment on section 244, which talks about renewables. Of course, the energy we use is a huge factor in our sustainable growth. I just couldn't help but to note. So there's the possibility that anyone proposing to use renewables would have to do an emission study where appropriate. I just get the biggest kick out of that. There is no demand whatsoever for the fossil fuel industry to do an emission study on their impacts in Severn Township, which would be probably 98 or closer to 100% of the emissions impacts related to housing. So I just find it ironic because in any plan to move forward, which is also noted with initiatives around climate change, it would be most interesting to have that kind of information. And yet renewables are asked to supply it on occasion. I just find that rather ironic. 3 questions. In section 2.3, could you please explain to me what a watershed framework is? That's one. I can ask them now and then you can just go in order. The second one is in section 2.5.3, talks about a parking review. And my question is, do we have an oversupply of parking? It just suggested to me that we do, and I was just not aware that we had an oversupply of parking, but I'd love to know what that means. And thirdly, in the wetlands change designations, we now have the natural heritage, and it's different from EP, and that's different from Greenlands. And I get the protection of provincially significant wetlands and significant coastal wetlands. I am a little worried about the designation of fairly significant natural features in Greenlands. For instance, wetlands that are 2 acres or larger are not considered, that are not PSWs. 2-hectare wetlands is a pretty important wetland by any stretch of the imagination. Also, the Greenlands designation includes significant features, including habitat of endangered species and regionally significant ANSIs. To me, those things are really important. I just hope we can protect some of those things. We can't be losing those things out there. So that's my question around, but around the wetlands, did the changes in the wetland evaluation system, i.e. getting rid of wetland complexing, did it affect the map in Schedule D? Is my question. Thank you.
Will it be Kathy or it'll be, okay, we'll stand by.
Do you want me to just go over the questions in order then?
I'm going to start with the end ones, and then it's a team effort here.
Yeah. So the watershed framework then?
Watershed framework we're going to come back to. I'm going to deal with the last ones first, the wetlands and the Greenlands comments. So first off, on the Greenlands piece, effectively, what's important to understand is that the designation, for example, identifies the features that are comprised within that designation, and then the designation acts like a trigger. So if there's a Planning Act application proposed, if there's a change in land use or a new lot being created or minor variance or something like that, then the Greenlands designation functions like a trigger that there could be a feature here that might need to be looked at. And it works in concert with Schedule D, which is the natural heritage schedule, because it identifies some of those detailed features and where they're located. So what ends up happening then is if through a preliminary review, it determines that, yes, we need to further evaluate this because there could be species at risk in that area, or because there's an ANSI, as you mentioned, in that area, it provides that opportunity for a site-specific study to be done, to be evaluated before development can proceed. So that's how the policies work. They work to basically advise the reader or advise staff or the applicant that there could be something that needs to be looked at here. So yes, if there's a feature there, it will be protected, and it's protected through that detailed study when an application is submitted, and whatever mitigation measures are required that come out of that environmental review. So that's how that works. As far as the wetland piece and the wetlands less than 2 hectares in size, the province only requires protection of provincially significant, the province requires protection of provincially significant wetlands, and then requires protection of other wetlands too. The county official plan is very specific, and it provides protection of those wetlands that are over 2 hectares in size. And then different policies exist for those that are less than 2 hectares in size. So the way this official plan is constructed is that doesn't matter what wetland it is, whether it's less than 2 hectares, more than 2 hectares, or PSW, if development's proposed in proximity to that, you would need an environmental study to be completed to review it. There's different policy sets that apply based on the size of the wetland that's being considered, and its value if it's a PSW. What was the other question? The one was about the parking. Do you want to deal with that, Katie?
Through the chair to Member Brennan's question on the parking. So it was, I believe, section 2.5.3. So basically that section is just saying that the implementing zoning bylaw will be reviewed in regards to parking. So agreed, we do have some areas of the township that have parking shortages, I would say. But we did recently have an application for reduced parking at the O'Reilly Square Mall. So we do definitely have some areas where parking is potentially an issue, but we also, council's priority is economic development. A lot of times when you're trying to locate a business within an existing downtown built up area, it's not possible for them to provide a great deal of parking. And then that's when we look at, is there going to be shared parking facilities with other businesses? Is there going to be township parking opportunities with what's called a cash in lieu of parking agreement, where an individual business could pay to then utilize township parking areas rather than supplying their own parking. So it basically just says we're going to review all of those things to see if the standards in our bylaw continue to be appropriate. And of course, as we build or strive to build more complete communities, the idea is that people hopefully would also walk and bicycle to these businesses rather than just relying on automobile parking. So it's just a lot of things in that one policy that speak to when we do a new zoning bylaw, how we're going to look at all these different parking factors. It's maybe not as relevant for us, but I know a lot of municipalities now are also requiring bicycle parking as part of development applications. Right. So we've seen that, I think, in some communities. Certainly, we have a pretty active cycling group in Simcoe County. So that's just one example of something we would be looking at when we do a new zoning bylaw. And that's what this policy provides for.
Sorry, I can deal with the watershed planning question. What that's meant is that if you have different watersheds within an area, that, for example, if you're taking water from one watershed, that it's not being piped over to a different one. And then, for example, if a well's within one watershed, it's generally services the population within that watershed, for example. And so that water maintains within that, can continue to feed that ecosystem within that current area. So that's big picture what the watershed planning piece deals with.
Thank you. No, thank you.
I believe Member Burkett's next.
Thank you. Through the chair. So first, before I speak, I did read the whole document. So I just want to thank, I did have a bunch of questions, but on Monday, Katie, Brad, and Emily helped me out. So I just want to thank you, Jamie, Kathy, Andrea, and Katie, and Brad and Emily for all your hard work on this document. It's quite an entailed document. And after I was done asking my questions, I said, everything's in here. Whenever you apply for anything, it's written here in black and white what needs to be done. So it was clear to me. I hope it's clear to all our residents as well. I do have one question. It's been almost 2 years since this has been approved. And to your comments, I'll go back to Southhorn Road 2956. If we were to look at changing the designation of this, is it going to hold up the official plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would be hypothesizing or I'd be speculating, I guess, if I answered that. But what could be done is if you were to modify this and the county found that to be an issue, they needed to review further, they could identify it as a non-decision. They've done that in the past in other lower tier official plans, where there's an outstanding issue that they need to review further, or they don't have direction on. They basically carve it out and say non-decision, and we'll proceed with everything else. So there's options for them.
So supplementary, if I may.
It could not. They can take that approach.
So I did sit both
Member Cox and myself did sit with the head planner down at the county talking about this piece of property. And his suggestion was what you said, Mr. Robinson. Allow them to apply, let this go through, allow them to make an application, and we'll look at this as a separate issue. I think that's what direction you were suggesting when you spoke this morning. That's the proper way to do it. And I think that's the way I would see it, listening to what the head planner down at the county had said to both of us. So again, thank you very much for everything.
Member Cox.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, what the member Burkett was just talking about. You had said that it's a site-specific basis application, right? So I just need some clarification on 6.5 on the adopted OP, 6.55, and then 6.56 is a notwithstanding the above employment land, and the new modified is 6.56. I just need clarification that if an application came through before the county approved our 6.56, would 6.5.5 and 6.56 still be the ones that you would have to look at and abide by? You see where I'm going with this? We need clarification. So if someone put in an application, a site-specific application, and the 6.55 and the 6.56 that is now in place was still in place when they put it through, the notwithstanding clause could be part of that. And I would suggest that that was probably in Ms. Phillips' letter, if that's something you would like to look at or come back next week with a comment on it. But my other one was, is there a timeline for applications, the site-specific one? Because I know that some of the people I've talked to are waiting for a couple of, reports to come back, or if they put them in, those types of things. And I just want to know, for the developers out there who are sitting waiting, are these things that will still work as you go forward, along with going to the county at the same time, hand in hand? Sorry, you know where I'm coming from?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So firstly, we'll come back with your question on 655 and 666. And then secondly, there historically, I'm saying historically because it hasn't always been the case, but there's been so many changes to the Planning Act. One of the changes was there was a moratorium at one point in time, 2 years after an OP was approved, you couldn't make an application to amend. Well, that's gone now, so that doesn't exist anymore. So certainly they could make an application at any time. Anyone could make a site-specific application at any time to modify an OP.
Thank you very much.
Member Minnings.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Robinson, initially, in your presentation, your slide mentioned that this was approved by council, but what I wanted to state was that it was approved on November 22nd, 2022. It was not this council, it was a previous council. I've never approved an official plan. This is my first time through it. So just however, and wherever that document's going to live forward, I just want that to be clear, that this is this council's first time looking at it. And I think that's an important distinction. I do have some questions, and certainly around my comments there related to policy, because the official plan is a policy document, and it is the responsibility of this council to set policy, and it's up to zoning to permit things that we include in the plan. So I do appreciate hearing about the professional opinions of all of you in this room, because that's exactly what we need to hear. But I need to align those with the lived experience and the real life experiences that are equally significant of what business owners and residents have been bringing to us and telling us in the over 18 months since I've been on council. And without going into details, I'm thinking about the resident who came forward with doggy daycare requests, and that the response to council at that time was that it would be eligible to be looked at as part of the official plan review and the zoning bylaws. And there are a number of times that we've heard things that, so Ms. Woodrow, I just saw your video March 6th at the 38-minute mark. That was what you had said, that we would need to look for the official plan to make changes to that. So where I'm looking is that we do need to look at permitting our land use. I understand that the County of Simcoe has some feedback, perhaps, if I understand correctly, on whatever amendments we're putting forward, but we still have the responsibility to put those amendments forward as they fit this township and the policies that we have within them. So I just want to give us license to make changes to zoning designations if they've been changed so that they meet the needs. I listened to the presentation from a consultant about the Coldwater potential subdivision, or the people who own the land that's designated industrial. What makes sense for this council as far as setting policies for what we need to see our communities? So yes, industrial land is absolutely required, and but we also need residential properties. So it's not one over the other. So I just want us to be able to set policies and really, take that literally and put policies forward and change designations within the official plan that meet our township, and then let the county or whoever come back and tell us otherwise. So getting into the plan, the first place I want to start with is 17.4.11.1. And it says that the township may consider passing a range of bylaws to regulate matters about use and enjoyment of lands pursuant to the Municipal Act, other legislation, etc. And then it goes on to say, including but not limited to, it talks about outdoor lighting bylaw, advertising sign bylaw, parking bylaw, short-term rentals bylaw, etc. So my first question is the addition of short-term bylaw in that paragraph a new addition? 17.4.11.1.
Through Mr. Chair, I'd have to go back and look at the comparison of it, but what this is intended to do is just identify sort of a range of other bylaws that could be considered by council. It's not supposed to be an exhaustive list by any means, but certainly it's a list of bylaws that could be considered.
Okay, so thank you. I'll just go on to state through the chair then that right now, the way it stands, and from what I've checked, it's my opinion that this is a new addition, and it should be deleted because Section 153 of the Act sets out that any business that is to be licensed should be in compliance with the Planning Act. And then that needs to be a permitted use under the zoning bylaw. So short-term rentals right now are not a permitted use. And then I see this addition as inappropriate because it implies that they are a permitted use, just like outdoor lighting, etc. So that's, I'll let you replay the tape and hear all that detail if you like. My other question is similar and it's around bed and breakfast. I was really intrigued, and I think my first read through is those are what stood out to me. So bed and breakfasts are mentioned in our official plan 14 times. Short-term rentals are mentioned once, and they're really hard to find because the hyphenation has an extra space in it, etc. So my first few times, short-term rentals didn't come up. So I was looking at the bed and breakfast. And I guess my question is, if someone's using a residential property in that regard, being paid money, and I'm ad libbing here, being paid money to use part of a residence for rental, I'm just wondering if short-term rentals should be in there, shouldn't be in there, if bed and breakfast come out. I'm just going to ask, where did I need to understand from you about bed and breakfast and short-term rentals. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the member. So bed and breakfasts are considered commercial uses. They're a business that operates out of a dwelling unit, so they are considered a commercial use. Short-term accommodations or short-term rentals are not considered a commercial use. They're a residential use of land. Short-term, just as some background, the rental of properties and the rental of residential properties, the rental of cottage properties has, I'll say, existed sort of since there were cottages in the first place. There has been a proliferation of rentals in recent years due to the online sharing platforms that exist, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, and those sorts of things. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the rental of a cottage is still a residential use from a planning perspective. The people that rent it would use it as the same in the same manner that the owner would use it, or if the owner's family was using it for a weekend. There's no distinction from a land use planning perspective between that. If the township identifies that there's an issue with the intensity of these short-term rentals, they could certainly look at establishing specific licensing to deal with short-term rentals or different bylaw modifications associated with those. But the township has been down that route previously and decided not to do anything on that front. They could certainly reopen that if they so chose. But the main point is that these are residential uses and not commercial uses.
Okay, thank you for that. I just needed to understand what the thinking was behind what's presented in the plan. Continuing on with 11.5.3.2 core commercial areas. There are communities that are listed under there, and the criteria definition in the plan says to encourage tourism development, enhance the character of the area, streetscape, all of those things, includes flowers, benches. I'd like to have Cumberland Beach added to there. They have a commercial area and right now absolutely no streetscapes. So I'd like the staff to take a look at having that added. My other comment is around the environmental protection designation, which is new, as you mentioned, section 11.2, and permitted uses, wetlands over 2 hectares. Over the past year and a half, I've had quite a few conversations and emails exchanged with residents and certainly with the staff and council about that. So I'm just wondering, my ask is that staff take another look and really strengthen that, because it's been my experience that when development comes into an area that's environmentally protected or designated under the ministry, so provincially, that development still happens, roads, clearings, etc., still go through, And I'm just wondering that my experience has been that we're reactive after things have already happened. In the case of trees, that's too late, rather than being proactive. So because this is a policy document, I would like us to see more proactive language around the environmental protection portion. Thank you very much.
Member Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to ask if the new electronic copy of the OP is done, hopefully it's more user-friendly, but you can click on table of contents and it'll go right to the, like it's trying to find things. Right off the start, I would agree with Member Minnings that any mention of short-term rental should be deleted from the OP. We haven't come to a conclusion on that and don't even open it up. First thing on the list is Jamie showed the map, Schedule D, Natural Heritage Features. If Allison could put that up. I'm querying about the ANSI in the north end of Ward 1. And just to confirm, I had to look at it twice to see where it is. I knew it's up near Burrows Lake, but it actually goes from Burrows Lake right over to Horseshoe Lake, right to Upper Big Shear Road. Is that correct, Jamie, if we could make that bigger? And this is an M&R and F map, is that correct? The reason why I'm asking it, we've had people using ATVs and terrorizing the area there. And I just wanted to see that it's a defined area. So am I correct in that? Just they didn't, it showed kind of a patchy yellow there. And I just wanted to see what area is encompassed, and does it go up to T Lake as well?
Through Mr. Chair, so that area, I think what you're referring to, it's sort of in a yellowy color on the map. It's identified as the life science ANSI. So what those are, they're areas of natural and scientific interests that are identified by the province. So there's two types of ANSIs. There's life science ANSIs and earth science ANSIs. So earth science ANSIs deal with landforms. Life science ANSIs usually deal with unique vegetative communities, I'll say, or there's unique vegetation within that area. That's, in this case, it's considered a provincial. So it's a provincially recognized area of unique vegetation. So the MNR does have data on what specifically comprises that provincial ANSI. We don't include that within the official plan, but it is available. But yes, it is considered an important feature.
Thank you for that. The Greenlands designation, and maybe you could help me historically, when the natural heritage mapping came out, and some of the lands switched from rural to Greenlands, is that correct? And what's the major difference having property zone Greenlands versus rural? Like, as far as I'm going to build a house on a vacant lot, what steps are different from being a zone rural versus Greenlands? And now the Greenlands is going to be called Natural Heritage System. Is that correct?
Just to be clear, on the designation map, which is the one that gets used most of the time, the Greenlands still exists. So there's the Greenlands designation and the Natural Heritage designation, and the EP designation. The Environmental Protection designation deals with provincially significant wetlands. Greenlands is kind of everything else. If you've got an existing vacant lot of record that you want to construct a house on, whether you're Greenlands or rural, you can build that house on that property. It doesn't change. You don't have to do an EIS or anything like that to construct a house in an existing vacant lot in the Greenlands. It would only be if you need Planning Act approval.
Because back to the question from Washago, when there's properties that are beside each other, what's the rationale of having different zoning? Like if you drive along and one piece, if I come out my front door and look out to the west the field in front of me is Greenlands, and to my left it's zone rural. Like it doesn't make any difference to me, but if there are the rules more impactful being Greenlands versus rural is my question. Like, do I bigger setbacks from waterways and stuff like that? Is it a detriment to be Greenland versus rural?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there are more limitations on development in Greenlands as opposed to rural. That's a fact. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that in the rural area, so outside of settlement areas, those are areas for limited growth and development, limited lot creation, limited things that would happen. So that's why I wanted to make it clear that if you wanted to construct a house or an accessory building or accessory structure on a property that's designated Greenlands, you're allowed to do that. The plan permits you to do that. So there's not a whole lot else that goes on from a buildings and structure perspective in the rural or the Greenlands area beyond constructing a house or an accessory building associated with that use. It's not like subdivisions are permitted in those areas or that sort of thing. But to answer your question specifically, yes, there's more limitations in the Greenland than rural. Where those designations came from was the county has a Greenlands designation within their county official plan, and we've aligned our designation with that, but we've also done some aerial photography refinements to it. We've gone around and looked specifically at the limits of bush lots and those sorts of things to try to refine the limits of the Greenland designation and as best as possible at the scale we're working with here.
So it's just in summary then on a Greenlands designation, if you're getting a building permit, you don't need an EIS. Is that correct?
Correct. Unless for some reason the zoning bylaw shows it as zoned or shows a portion of it as EP. But from the policy perspective, that's not what triggers an EIS. And no site plan. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. And then one other question on item 9.4.4.3, 112 of 344. It says that the township will not do any upgrade to unassumed roads, but we do have trivial maintenance roads that do require trivial maintenance. And I just want to make sure that that does not get written in stone, that there is some trivial maintenance happening on a few roads. I know for sure in Ward 1. So how can we word that as such?
I'll take that through, Mr. Chairman. I'll take that back and consider it. I think the intent of that is that if a building permit was issued for something, or if someone has any sort of structure, existing development off of one of those right of ways, that there should be no assumption that the municipality is going to make improvements to it, but we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, the actual statement said it's not a policy of this plan that unassumed roads be upgraded by the township.
Right. Yeah. So I'll consider that, but I believe the term upgraded means change in classification, like from an unassumed road to an assumed road. I don't think it specifically means.
I didn't read it that way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Member Burkett.
Thank you through the chair. And sorry, Jamie, I didn't give you the heads up on the question I'm going to ask. Knowing what happened with a couple of counties just recently in the province of Ontario, and the county of Simcoe named as it possibly would be taken out as the deciding upper tier authority. And if they don't finish our official plan or approve our official plan in time, and you may not know the answer to this, what would happen then? Does it have to go to Toronto or
through you, through you, Chair, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen if that's the case, but what could happen, there's two things that could happen is you become your own approval authority for official plans, or the province could become the approval authority for your official plan. So instead of dealing with the county, you'd be dealing with the province. That's what could happen. But
Member Minnings.
Thank you through the chair. So with having said that, the uncertainty as to the final approval of this official plan, I'd like to see that the public comments and the comments made here around redesignating certain land parcels be included in this current version of the official plan, and wait for someone else, like a higher authority, if that ever happens, to come back and tell us we can't do that. Because as it's been stated, over and over with different things, that people come to us because the zoning either doesn't make sense. It's historically happened from not just decades ago, but hundreds of years ago. So I think we need to help ourselves and do some cleaning of some of the zoning that's been identified and anywhere else, so that this official plan stops bogging down people who want to make land improvements and meetings, et cetera, because we're starting to just repeat the same things over and over. And I'm seeing a lot of duplication of effort of similar applications that are being brought to the township that then have to come to council. So where we can help ourselves and where we have the ability to clean up some of those zoning designations, I think will serve us well as a council, as residents, and certainly as a township, as far as staffing strengths and workload, et cetera. Thank you.
Member Taylor.
Yeah, just one last question on 4.4.5 enforcement. That's on page 62 of 344. I'm wondering if staff and or our consultants can comment on being proactive or not proactive. Because basically, I think the premise of staff, they work on complaints driven, whereas this is going above and beyond, and where I read this.
Through the chair to member Taylor's comment, I think we have to think about this official plan in general. Lots of the comments, it's a may consider, this one included, is the township may consider publishing an enforcement strategy. So this is just an outlet to allow council in the future, without amending their official plan, to consider doing these things. So it's not to say that we will do them. It says we may consider in the future. So it's not, we're not suggesting through this document a change to our current process.
Yeah, but my concern is may means it's not consistent. It's depends. It's not consistent.
Through the chair, respectfully, I guess I disagree. I think may means we may do it in the future. We may change our approach in the future. That's the way I read this document. And I think most of the planners in this room would probably also read the document, that it's just something that allows the township in the future, should they wish to give staff a different direction than the current situation.
Madam CEO.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to what Councilor Minnings asked for, to make sure that staff has clear direction, because what I think I heard was Councilor Minnings wants all of the changes that people have requested made. So is that what I heard?
Thank you through the chair to our CAO. I don't know what all of the requests for changes to land designation are. As Ms. Mandeville stated at the front, there's been additional correspondence received, and she mentioned one of the school boards, for example, other people. I haven't seen those. I don't know when we'll see those, but I'm looking for the township to propose changes to zoning where it makes sense. And some of that absolutely has been designated here. So we're looking at at a very busy future. I know further in the day, we're talking about another consultant report that the township paid for on staffing and workload and positions and all of that. So I think that there's an opportunity to look for efficiencies where they make sense. And I would leave that to you professionally. I've certainly heard a lot of great examples of where those could be, where they won't slow down processes for people and also for the staff. But it is alarming when I hear that some applications have been multiple years in the works and still not resolved. So I'm looking at the official plan, and from the comments that I've heard over the last 18 months about wait for the official plan amendment, wait for the official plan amendment, and we can address it there, we can look at it then. So that's what I'm doing now.
Madam CAO.
Okay, so I'm still not 100% clear. So if I give a couple of examples, you mentioned doggy daycare. So we did talk past that March 6th that you referenced, and council very specifically said, don't include it in the official plan because we want to keep it moving. So that happened after March 6th. We've had Greenwood looking to have their lands redesignated to residential. That will slow your process up. The council, the Simcoe County is still our approval authority until there isn't. When they aren't, could be any time, and likely there will be a transition rule. So if we get our plan into it, they probably won't change midstream. So I'm just a little concerned about how much change you want to make at the last minute, and I need some global direction from council on that.
Thank you. So just through the chair, I'll just make a final comment. I'm not the expert on that and which specific changes. I'll leave that to you. I just simply gave a few examples of what I've heard and for looking for further efficiencies, because just in my read through and in listening to some of the discussions, you know, some of the examples are absolutely going to come back to council or have to go through more in-depth processes, and I'm looking for efficiencies here.
Member Burkett.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I'm not in favor of putting in the OP a doggy daycare, because that entails, well, I'm a little confused about, you'll have to be more clear. So I want to take the doggy daycare out because that entails a whole public meeting, entails township wide, just not isolated to one part of our township. Why I spoke to 2956 Southhorn Road and the designation of the employment lands, that's an isolated case that we can look at. As I said, spoken to the planner down at the county, let the OP be finalized, let it be approved. That's something the developer can then bring back to our staff and then bring back to council for us to look at. That's the proper way to do it. So I'm not sure, Member Minnings, what other things, because you need to give direction to staff as to what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you, through the chair. So I think this is the proper way to do it, to have open meetings, public meetings, and not just volley it back to the county. And, you know, respectfully, the CO said that, you know, we're at a time crunch. Well, it's been with the county since November 2022. I've had it for a week. And now you want us to come back 7 days from now and approve it? I don't know what the urgency is of approving this official plan. I haven't seen the correspondence that's been submitted. I've had a week to look through, as everyone else has, a plan that's been with a county for 20 months, almost 2 years. And I'm saying that we set policy and that we need to control that. And if we're going to set policy as a council, we need to set policy. We need to be really clear about what we're going to do. So unless there's an absolute stop, like a deadline that this has to get back at a certain date, I'm not aware of that. But like, I just don't understand the urgency. And then the other thing that I will say is that, you know, and again, I heard from Member Burkett that, you know, you've discussed it with members of staff, and I wrote down, you said from your perspective, everything is done. Well, then why are we having a public meeting, and why did I just spend the last 3 hours of my life here? Everything isn't done. This is an opportunity. This is a process that governments go through. And I want us to go through this process. Thank you.
Member Burkett, supplemental.
Thank you through the chair. We've had, I think we were elected in 22, and this was approved by the previous council, which I sat on. So we've had a couple of years to look at that. Why the county takes so long? I can tell you our staff as well as our consultants have been back and forth with things. Again, the county is the deciding authority who takes direction from the province. So we have to meet their guidelines based on what we would like to see within our official plan. It's taken this long because it's been back and forth. Our staff are very busy. And you did say that some of the applications have been waiting for this official plan. For us to now hold it up even longer when we have residents out there that are waiting to have this official plan approved, it has to go back to the county, and there may be comments. Now, the consultant, Jermey, and his team are going to come back next week with a report for us to look at again. It is very time consuming. As I said, I went through it. I had all these questions, and in all fairness, I sit with staff beforehand, as we all can, rather than blindside them. I can ask them questions beforehand so they can give us the appropriate answer. They answered all my questions. So and maybe I phrased it wrong. I was happy with what I saw, what I read in the document. I now have a better understanding when I went through it and we did have a previous public meeting, which you could have read and weighed in on. So for you to say that you just read it and only gave us a week to decide and read such a large document, I don't think is fair. Anyways, all I'm saying is that I'm not in favor of placing the doggy daycare in this OP as it's now. Just remain the way it is, because that involves a township-wide procedure with public meetings to see whether or not it's okay. And the other issue with the 2956 Southwarn, which I've already spoken to, which I won't speak to again. Those are my comments, Chair.
Healthy discussion. Member Cox.
Yeah, I think we're sort of going off on one way and another way here. And Jermey or planning staff, please help me go through this. You were talking about amendments, and amendments are different than the official plan itself. So I would like Mr. Robinson to sort of run this official plan. You put the key changes in. This is the basis for how we do our planning. And if someone comes in and wants something different from what we have as our guidelines, which are handed down from the province, then they have to do an amendment. And it doesn't matter if we pass this tomorrow or we pass it last week or we pass it, there will always be official plan amendments. But I would like Mr. Robinson to sort of walk through that with you so you understand that the official plan and our policies are different than amendments.
Through Mr. Chair, no, you're right. The official plan does set sort of a baseline set of policy directions for the municipality. And if you think back to some of my first comments, it's a snapshot of what the municipality would like the community to look like in the next 20 years. Certainly things change, and planning documents, be it the official plan or the zoning bylaw, they're living and breathing documents, and they're subject to change and modification. And the Planning Act allows for those modifications to be completed, allows anyone to make an application at any point in time to amend an OP or a zoning bylaw. So certainly, is it a perfect document? Probably not. As we work with it and as the municipality works with it, there will be changes that need to be made to it to address issues that arise that are unforeseen, for example, or that come about as a result of the use of the document. So certainly, there is an opportunity to make changes in the future if they arise.
And supplemental, and it has to be reviewed every 5 years? 10. But a council or a planning department could ask to have it relooked at if there were major issues or something changed drastically, and like COVID or something big, but even bigger than that. But I just want to understand that this, as Jamie said, is a living, breathing document. People will come in and ask us for things, and we have to have rules and basis to say to them, you know what? Yes, you can, but you have to apply for that amendment, because not everybody in the township wants that amendment. It's the same as you go to a public meeting and 20 people say, I don't want this. 15 people say I do, and 5 say I don't know. And we haven't even heard from all the public. We've only heard from the people who actually go to the meeting and show up and say those things. So it's just, I think it's much like our master recreation plan, or all of our plans are there as basis for us and our staff as a guideline on how we are going to go towards the future and how we're going to be there. And if there are any changes, we have the ability anytime to relook at them. Yes? Working document. Thank you. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to point, we live on a mountain of decisions that have been made by previous councils, bylaws, strategies, all kinds of things. That's life. That's the way it works. And I would be opposed to any delay in the official plan. It's been worked on by people for a long period of time. And as has been suggested, we all have different views, and it may not be perfect, but I think it's as good as it gets. I'm very satisfied with the responses to the individuals and to suggestions that came in today. There's been a commitment made to review them on an individual basis, which in my opinion is the proper way to do planning, and to get back, and we'll hear about it as the final show comes down. I think that's more than fair. And I think it is listening. Just to sort of jump around on things like, I don't know, you mentioned the doggy daycare. I think most people around here know how I feel about changing those rules. But sometimes we have to be a little more careful. And yes, we do want to move ahead, but let's not get too hasty with things. I would like to see some intelligent thinking going into final decisions around all the matters that were discussed today. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we've had a healthy discussion regarding this matter, and I think we should maybe now call for a draft motion.
Thank you. The motion reads that planning report number P24-025 dated June 19th, 2024, with respect to the proposed updated new official plan for the Township of Severn be received, and further that MHBC and planning staff be directed to bring a recommendation report to council and outline the next steps in the approval process.
Sorry, just through the chair to the clerk, does that motion speak to amendments?
I believe, and I can ask Mr. Robinson to speak to this, but I believe that report will include any recommended amendments and a summary table of the comments that have been received.
Just like from the chair's place, I'd like to say thank you very much to Mr. Robinson and Madam Suggitt for their comprehensive effort in this. And further, I'd like to thank the public for coming and having their say due process. And thank you all very much. You can remain if you wish, or you can go for lunch. We're going to continue. I'd like to close this public portion of the meeting. I don't think I need a motion for that, do I? Okay, I then declare the public meeting this closed. We're going to proceed now to the planning and development agenda. And we could probably have a 5-minute bio.
Almost done.
Oh, do you think 5 minutes? Okay, sorry about that. We're okay. We'll proceed from there then. Where are we going to D?
Yes, we're just seeking, we have no delegations.
No
So-
consent agenda.
So it's just,
Reports from officials.
I believe we just need to approve the agenda, Mr. Chair. So,
Do we have a motion, please?
yes, so the motion reads that the agenda be adopted, including consent items as circulated.
All in favor? Oh, first of all, a mover, member Taylor, second member Brennan, all in favor? Good. No reports from official. Where are we now? Down to planning?
I believe you're at
G1?
G.1.
Okay, planning report deeming bylaw. I guess we need to move to accept this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think council's very familiar with deeming bylaws. We've done quite a few of them. This might be an area we can find an efficiency in the future because you can delegate these to staff. So I'll have to keep that in mind. So basically deeming bylaws, deeming two properties. These are two properties on Rockcliffe Court that have historically been used together as one property. They'd like to build a new accessory structure on the one lot, and they cannot do that unless we pass this deeming bylaw. So unless there's any questions, I'm happy to leave it there.
Mover, seconder, please. Move by member. Wait, now, hold on. Well, let's get a motion first. Thank you.
Okay, the motion reads that planning report number P24-024 dated June 19th, 2024, with respect to deeming bylaw application for lands described as Lot 3 and 4, Plan 51M 342, known municipality as 3274 and 3282 Rockcliffe Court be received, and that the draft deeming bylaw included as attachment 4 to planning report P24-024 be brought forward immediately. And for that, should council pass the deeming bylaw, the clerk be directed to provide a certified copy of the bylaw to the clerk of the county Simcoe per section 5026 of the Planning Act.
Okay, moved by member Burkett, seconded by member Minnings. All in favor? Carried. New business? No new business? Closed session? You don't have a closed session? Move to adjourn, please. Moved by member.
Motion to adjourn that.
The motion for
that this meeting is being here and now adjourned at 12:02 p.m.
Moved by member Cox, second by member Brennan. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Fine job, Mr. Chair.
Well, Steve was a long one, buddy, but we ran, all right.